Omega probably had studied infantry tactics, but like most non-infantry, probably thought that it knew better. Many virtual reality first-person shooter players joined the Corps and were shocked when they discovered that the tactics in their little games didn't work very well in real life. Age-old wisdom dictates that one should always take the hill. I changed our objective marker as the lights within the shuttle turned red and an alarm began blaring. The ride had smoothed out, so most of the newer Marines were confused. Those of us who had been on these shuttles in these circumstances before knew better and weren't very surprised. "Ma'am, is this alarm anything to be worried about?" PFC Rogers asked our pilot. "It means we're being shot. Our shields are holding up fine, so whatever's doing the shooting isn't rated against aircraft. It's nothing to worry about while you're aboard, but the landing's going to be pretty hot, so you might as well worry about that instead," she replied. "They still got it, so you can't turn it off?" Gruff asked. "Yep. Apparently we gotta know whenever we get hit." We sat quietly and waited for the landing. The only sounds were the occasional shifting of the shuttle and the impact alarm. After a few moments, the fidgeting started. Weapons checks making sure seals were snug, tapping feet and fingers on whatever surface was available. Standard fare for impatient Marines. We didn't have to wait long, though. "Drop off imminent. I was right, this LZ is hot. Careful out there," our pilot said. "Roger that, ma'am. All right, Marines, places. Charlie's on point. Reinhardt and Boyle are carrying the box," I ordered. "Oorah, Staff Sergeant." We stood as we felt the shuttle land and the two privates grabbed the box. I chose these two because one of them is right-handed and the other is left-handed, which lets them keep their weapons outbound in opposing directions. The hatch opened, and we were treated to the sight of the shuttle's shield flaring. It looks similar to an aurora when it's light on light. Just a dull orange wave when it's kinetic, though. Chang took the lead and was followed by Rogers, Higgs, then Int. Their weapons began firing as soon as they cleared the shield. "Bravo's next. Go, go, go," I shouted. Brent took point for Bravo team, followed by the box carriers with Gruff trailing. Their guns also began firing as soon as they cleared the shield, which is a less than great sign of the fight to come. "Livingstone, you won the toss-up for point this time, right?" I asked. "Yes, Staff Sergeant," Livingstone said with glee. "We'll get going then." I gave the Lance Corporal a slight shove and followed directly behind him. Private Johns was directly behind me and Lance Corporal Hart was guarding our ass. Livingston left the shield targeting left, so I targeted right and stepped out, immediately sighting something to shoot at. Shot, sparks, target falling. Move to defensive position, get some space. Acquire next target. Shot, no sparks, fire again. Shot, sparks, target spazzing. Shot, target falling. I'm hit, only a tenth gone. Not a concern. Shot, miss, shot, sparks, acquiring shot, headshot. Target still mobile, they don't need a head shit. Shot, center mass, sparks, target down. Hit again, taking a knee, scanning, 2 targets, switch to auto. Die, motherfucker, die, get some, release trigger. Targets down, scanning sector. One more, switch to semi, shot, target falling. Checking fallen targets, no movement. I kept my eyes on my sector until the rest of the gunfire stopped. "Clear?" I asked. 12 green lights lit up to indicate an affirmative. I gestured for us to start to move out, and we all stood back up and began to march. The ground beneath us was an unnerving yellow color, and didn't quite feel like dirt. Too crunchy. The sky was a darker than normal blue, which led to some odd optical illusions. Mirages, I suppose. There were random hills of varying size as well. Some of them were closer to mounds, and off in the distance it looked like there might be some mountains. I wonder if that means there's tectonic activity. I tried to remember my geology lessons to no avail. As far as plants or animals, there were none. Not a blade of grass or even a small lizard as far as our magnified eyes could see. The only sound was some wind and the crunch of our boots as we marched. As the hill we wanted to be on got into sight, I smiled. It was perfect. Around the base of the hill was a vast amount of relatively flat ground, giving us perfect coverage all around the hill. "All right, excavation tools out. Help Yunk dig a nice pit on the top for him and the box to hang out in. Then buddy up and dig yourself a hole about 3/4 the way up the hill. I want a nice radius with good spacing. Don't forget your sumps. Make 'em nice and big. We don't know how large their grenades are," I ordered as we reached the base of the hill. "You think they've got grenades, Staff Sergeant?" Rogers asked. "If they've got tanks, they've got grenades. Now get to digging." Bravo team remained with the box as the rest of us dug the pit. A few random robots came to check on us, but they were quickly taken care of. When the pit was big enough, Bravo team carried the box up the hill, and then we all got to work digging our foxholes. I ended up paired with Lance Corporal Hart. We dug a luxurious hole in the hill that would be our home for who knows how long. I couldn't help but grin, knowing what awaited our enemies once we were done. There's nothing more infuriating to an assault team than foxholes on a hill. Once everyone was done, the sound of E-tools being collapsed and stored was quickly followed by the sounds of Guardian gauntlets smacking together. Standard procedure for foxholes was to have one on watch and one down for rest. The sound was Rochambeau, rock, paper, scissors, to decide who took which shift first. So hey, Staff Sergeant, you want to play Rochambeau to see who's on watch first? Hart asked me. No, I trust in your watch-taking capabilities, Lance Corporal. Why don't you show him how it's done? I said with a grin. Hart sighed as he turned to look over the landscape, and I laughed as I sat down. Rank has its perks, and being squad leader is even better. I double-checked my weapon and leaned back. I was nearly ready to take a nap when Omega pinged our comms. Everyone is in position, beginning Operation Vainglorious Infiltration, it said. A series of obligatory negativity and profanity rose from the foxholes in the hill. I just rolled my eyes and closed them, ready for a little nap. As it turns out, the USS Thanatos is one hell of a ship. I'm not normally one to avoid taking part in the fighting, but Admiral Heckett had finally worn me down, and I accepted his invitation to join him. He made several good points, such as it being easier to coordinate if we were within earshot of one another. He'd also said that the food aboard the Thanatos was great, not that that was necessarily a factor in my decision. Once aboard, I had opted to take a tour and had struggled to keep my beak from gaping when I was shown the docks. Rooms that were unbelievably massive, with the sole purpose of holding entire frigates. The Omni Union also has these carrier ships, but the Republic phased them out of production over 3 centuries ago. They cost a lot of resources, and since our ships weren't exactly getting damaged very often at the time, it had made sense financially. The Thanatos was a whole different breed of ship, though. It was absolutely massive, and somehow it was sparkling clean. I love the Null Baronil with all my heart, but if I were offered the command of a ship like this, I'd take it in a heartbeat. Especially if it came with the technology to keep it this clean. This wasn't my first time seeing a carrier, but it was my first time seeing one in service. It was also my first time seeing one large enough to carry frigates. The largest carriers that I've previously seen could only carry corvettes or fighters. Once I brought this up to my gaunt guide, he gave me a wide grin showing off his carnivorous fangs and told me that he had something that he wanted to show me. We boarded a shuttle that they called a bus, and I saw a sign on the wall that said Fighter Bay with a directional arrow. No way. We entered the door and my beak dropped open, dozens of fighters all lined up in a neat row. I turned to my guide. How? I asked, dumbfounded. A combination of gaunt engineering and human know-how. They come up with the ideas and we help them implement them. There was some excess space on the hull of the original plans for the carriers, and humans hate wasted space, he replied. So they figured out that they could fit just about 500 fighters in such a way to maximize their deployment. Of course, the Thanatos is a diplomatic carrier, so it's smaller than the big girls. Thanatos holds 100. The big girls? Oh, yes, of course. I had noticed the larger carriers. They look absolutely massive. Do they also hold more frigates than the Thanatos? I asked, recovering from the shock. No, sir. The standard-sized carriers hold destroyers, 30 of them. That design's getting pretty old, though. There's rumors of another carrier design that can hold 50 destroyers, the Gaunt said with another grin. 30 destroyers? U.S. destroyers? The same destroyers that are half again the size of our own, with armaments that would make an Iceland drool? The engineering required for such a task alone is mind-boggling, but actually completing it and mass-producing it, there were over 500,000 of those things in the system right now. I closed my beak again, somewhat regaining my composure. The carriers fielded by the OU weren't equipped to fight very hard on their own, but these ones could probably go toe-to-toe with a battleship if they needed to. Even with that being the case, they still carried 30 destroyers. I looked back at the fighters. Their flight consoles were all lined up in a glass container along the far wall. I turned back to the Gaunt. Why? I asked. What you mean, sir? What motivated this particular engineering marvel? I clarified. The Gaunt looked nervous for a moment before saying, Well, sir, I ain't sure that it's my place to tell you. The humans don't like talking about it, and I don't blame 'em. Thing is, it's not their fault. They've tried their best, sir. They really have. What do you mean? I asked. On this side of space, you got yourself a bunch of bastards, sir. The thing about them bastards is that if you give them even an inch of leeway, they'll make sticks that are so big your own will end up useless. So you've got to make even bigger sticks to keep them in line, you know what I mean? Sure, I said before remembering my composure. This Gaunt's accent was oddly disarming. Yes, I think so. The worst part is that the bastards aren't just one species. Every species has their own set of bastards looking to start fights to try to get a bigger piece of an imaginary pie when there's more than enough to go around. The Nu and the Alumari are pretty good at bonking their bastards, but the Gaunt and the humans have very cunning and particularly ruthless bastards to contend with. And those bastards complement each other something fierce, he said with an expression of sorrow. I think I understand, I said with a soft tone and a nod. I'm afraid you don't, sir. It's much worse than you probably realize. And I really shouldn't be telling you, but I've already said too much to leave it hanging, he said with a large sigh. Of all the people to be telling this to, an admiral. Well, if it makes you feel better, I'm a fleet leader, not an admiral, I said, smiling with my eyes. I was rewarded with a small laugh. I guess so, sir. All right. So when the U.S. first made contact with the Gaunt, some of us didn't want to integrate. The U.S. was prepared to leave well enough alone, so there wasn't any undue pressure or anything. But integration would have improved our quality of life and done away with a certain authoritarian form of government that plagued our systems. On paper, our citizens voted for their leaders, and those leaders made all of the decisions regardless of the wishes of the people. We had tried many times to change this style of leadership, but it would always revert within a generation or two. The humans have an old saying, might is right. That's what these guys believed in, he explained. I nodded. Dictatorships weren't unheard of among the Republic member species. As a matter of fact, the Oyan had a planetary dictatorship on one of our colonies. It was a restricted dictatorship, and those restrictions were enforced by Republic law, but it was still considered stifling by many other Oyan. Well, a bunch of the leaders and most of the people wanted to join the United Systems, but a lot of the rich, the humans call them oligarchs, didn't want that. It would mean less power and influence for them, and greed is about the biggest motivator for a bastard. So there was a civil war, not that there was anything civil about it. We fought, and as I said, the U.S. tried to let us figure it out on our own. But then the oligarch bastards went around everyone's backs and started buying weapons and tech from the human bastards. Corporate conglomerations or whatever they're called. He shuffled nervously. This set off a terrible chain of events. Our side ended up buying weapons from the U.S., and their side kept buying weapons from the human corporations. But the corporations couldn't supply nearly what the U.S. could, so we ended up with the advantage. We ended up bonking the bastards and joined the U.S. That sounds like a happy ending, I said. What went wrong? We didn't bonk them hard enough. After we joined the U.S., the corporations that sold the weapons to the bastards were exposed. It was apparently illegal for them to have sold weapons like that, and since they were human corporations, humanity decided to try to handle it internally. But the human bastards had plenty of political pull, and used everything at their disposal to avoid the consequences of their bastardly ways. Things got bad, real bad. Politicians were assassinated, factions were formed, and governments were overthrown. The humans ended up having a civil war of their own. Ouch, I replied. Yeah, no kidding. Their civil war lasted for 100 years. Some people call it the corporate war, but that's not what it actually was. Humanity had plenty of grievances stored up at that point in their history, and we were the spark that blew that powder keg sky high. What's a powder keg? I asked. Oh, that's one of them human sayings. Their primary infantry weapons traditionally use an explosive substance called gunpowder that used to be stored in wooden containers called kegs. It's extremely flammable and explosive, so all it takes is a spark to make it go boom.